Hi, boys and girls, it's Miss Leah. I've missed all of you. I hope everyone's making out okay and doing their schoolwork from home. I wanted to read a story to you today since I haven't been able to see you. This would be a nice way for us to connect. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs was the one I chose. I love this story. All right. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, heading towards the kitchen ceiling and landing right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventful. All of the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale bedtime story he had ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was very much like the other tiny towns. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there was no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day. At breakfast, lunch, and dinner, everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain, and it never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. And it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas, and sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. That's cool. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, napkins, everything with them. That way, they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals. Look at that. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time, it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, Frankenfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds everywhere. Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans and a drizzle of soda to finish off the meal. Wow. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with the occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing with a wonderful jello mold setting in the west. The sanitation department of the Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and the sidewalks and the lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and the cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and the turtles and whales to eat, and the rest of the food was put back into the earth so the soil could be richer for the people's flower gardens. Oh, jello mold. Look at their job. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worst. Spaghetti ties up town. One day there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. The next day there was only broccoli, all overcooked. And the next day there were Brussels sprouts with peanut butter and mayonnaise. Another day there was pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going. They could barely find the rest of the meal. They got stuck in the fog. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, and some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye bread and whole wheat toast, most of it larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everything had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards for the birds to pick at it a bit, but they just stayed there and got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning with a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because it weighed so much that they had to close the school. There's all the rolls. Oh, look, there's the school. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate them themselves until they got sick, and the day ended with stomach aches. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running all over to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. Oh, let me see. Look at that tornado. Oh. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by the giant meatballs. The stores were boarded up and there was no more school for the children. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. Look at this mess. Look at that. The people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread sandwich style with peanut butter and took the absolute necessities with them. They set sail on their rafts for a new land. Peanut butter and jelly boats. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change that they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remembered his goodnight kiss. The end. Oh, look at their little houses. That's cool. Oh, that was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I will continue to read a few if you want to keep logging on. I hope everyone's making out so good. And maybe you can comment. We can talk back and forth. Hope everyone has a good day.